What is up guys, this is Wim and in this video you will learn how to make incredible lead sounds like this and beautiful chords like this. But first I wanna play the full template because I actually created a whole track here in this style of Merino Canal, and after that we're gonna jump in there and I'm gonna explain you everything step by step. Let's analyze the track first before we jump into Ableton. The amazing thing about those dark, emotional melodic techno tracks, especially for Merino Canal, are that you can easily play them on a chilled afternoon watching the sunset, yet at the same time they're absolutely banging in the club. And the reason for that is mostly that we have a very nice and subby kick and bass line, and in the bass line you would also not find many high frequencies, and that is why, for example, on a small Bluetooth speaker the track sounds very chill, but if you play them in the club with those very big subwoofers, they sound like absolute bangers. Now on top of that we usually have quite minimal drums with a lot of reverb that already create a very nice and big atmosphere. And then we also often see monotone groove elements like plugs that have a lot of modulation on them so they stay interesting. And then we are later introducing some arpeggiator sounds. And then of course in those beautiful emotional tracks we are opening the tracks up and releasing some tension when we introduce those big beautiful chords. And this is exactly what we did in this track, so let's jump into it. So as a kick sample I started out with this very minimal sounding kick, but for me I always like to add a little bit of distortion, and that just makes the sound way nicer in my opinion. Especially in connection with those nice sub bass. And for the sub bass I found this preset here, which sounds like a very classical bass here. And then I just added a little bit of processing here. As you can see, I wanted to make it absolutely mono. And we added some nice distortion again. So we're adding some nicer, higher harmonics here that we are actually cutting away mostly again here. Because as I said in the intro, we don't want to have too many high frequencies here because otherwise the track is just getting way too progressive. We want to stay in this dark atmosphere, and for that reason I'm just cutting away most of the high frequencies here. That already sounds quite nice, but of course I also added a little bit of group processing again. The same as always, I did a little bit of compression here. Then I added even a little bit more distortion here. And then we also use this rare equalizer again to boost those very low frequencies here, around 30 to 60 Hertz. And as I said in the intro, we want to have this very nice and punchy sub bass, and this equalizer here is making it way more subby. And also the groove here for the bass line is really as simple as it can be. The most common melodic techno pattern that is actually out there. But as you can see, it's very easy to come up with a nice and punchy kick and bass line. So let's go on with the drums. First we have the 16th note hi-hat here. This time I actually didn't add any processing. If you watch my videos a lot, you already know that I like to add this vocoder effect, which has this really nice white noise. And I explained this also in my last video, and it's giving us this very nice melodic techno vibe. But actually for this track, because we want to keep this very dark and minimal atmosphere, we actually don't want to use that, because like this, the head is not really taking a lot of space in our mix. And as you can see, I even took the decay down here. So it sounded way bigger before. And on those dark tracks, you want to have some nice and short sounds in here. And this head worked perfect. I added a little bit of randomness here to the velocity. And as you can see, we don't even have any velocity going on in here, but it worked already perfect in our track here. Now as a clap, we actually use a rim shot, or two different ones to be specific. And yeah, I think I just heard this in one of Merino Canal's tracks, so I wanted to try it out. And first, I think I started with this high rim shot here, which sounds really nice with a lot of reverb on it. But if you play it together with the kick and bass, it sounds alright, but it's lacking a little bit of the low frequencies here. So I added this darker rim shot here. And you can see if we're taking one of them away, it sounds very empty, but together they are really grooving very nicely. On this higher rim shot, we actually added some grain delay. Not sure why, but it's adding a very nice texture here, just very subtly mixed in. And after that, I actually found this rim loop here from Audio 10, which sounds like this. Just added a little bit longer echo delay here, and it actually works great in our track because we also already have this rim shot, and it's also a very nice addition to our lead sound that we introduce later. So I actually just sliced this loop up a little bit and just spaced them at some parts where I thought it could fit. I actually layered it on top of the lead sound here, or sometimes even in the spaces where it's not playing, and that's just a very nice little organic addition here. Then we have this nice and big open hi-hat. Some very important processing here, especially the equalizer is taking out all of the dirt in the low frequencies here, which sounds just way better in our mix. We just did a little bit of compression on those very sharp transients, which is also very important in our mix here. And also this Haas effect, spreading it out into the stereo field here. Then we have this very simple shaker loop here without any processing. This is a very nice percussion loop here, very short transients as you can see. Sometimes it's just really nice to take a loop here to add some additional groove to your track. And also I applied this delay here just on the very high frequencies, which is also adding a little bit of stereo movement here. Here, very important again, if we play this together in the whole track. It's just way too much. And like this is just very subtly playing and creating a very nice atmosphere here. Similar with this loop over here. Just added some auto pan to make it more interesting and cutting out all of the unnecessary frequencies. And also, as I said, we want to have the high frequencies here, not the low ones. So I also pitched it up by 3 here. And yeah, then of course we also have some group processing here. As always, I use this compressor here. Then I just did a very simple low cut, and I also was thinking we could add a little bit more of those high sparkle frequencies over here. And then you can see actually a very uncommon technique here. I have this Valhalla vintage verb quite high mixed in here on this whole drum bass. Now usually you want to go into your drums and just apply some reverb with your Synths, for example, but this time I think it was actually more of a mistake, but at the end for me it worked, so I left it on here. So especially on this rim clap here, it's creating this very nice and big atmosphere. Now you can see how important it is to add a little bit of group processing. You don't need to do it with the reverb like I did it, but especially some compression and these low cuts are very important on the drum group. And as you can see, I also have a little bit of automations here on the whole drum group. I usually like to add some reverb at some parts just to make some kind of a natural transition. And you can already hear it coming in over here. This big and nice reverb. And that often works way better than, for example, using some white noise, because we're really creating this nice and organic transitions with the elements that we already have in the track. And you can really try to be as minimalistic as possible with this. It's always a good idea to keep your track numbers here as low as possible. And for example, like here, if you don't need to add any additional FX sound, you can also just very easily create some nice and easy transitions like this. And this is already everything for the drums. Let's jump into the more interesting part, which is the synth sounds. And as you can see, we are starting out with this atmosphere sound here. Just one note here. And I just found this preset in the Hive here. And at some parts we will automate the cutoff frequency over here. And this is just a very simple and effective way of creating some tension and also some transitions in your track. And also, if you don't know how to start your track, this is a very good starting point. Just creating this atmosphere sound, which is already filling our track here out with a little bit of melodic content. And you can see this. First, we're gonna take this away. And And the track sounds kind of empty, but when we add this atmosphere sound, you already have some melodic content here straight from the beginning, and it makes your track way more interesting and also consistent until the very end of our track here. And then we have a whole group here of plug and arpeggiator sounds. It's actually 4 different sounds in here. And let's just go through here one by one. First we have this glitch plug. And the glitches here are mostly coming from the portal. As you can see, I have 3 units here stacked up. Some crazy equalizing. Again, because we want to push this into the background. And like this is just a very basic plug. So you already know that I really like to use this portal effect and just play around with those presets here. Just creating some glitches. Yeah, basically we are also just playing this through the whole track and just mixed in very, very low here. And then we have the next arpeggiator sounds here, which is coming in a little bit later here in the track. Very nice sound from the Yuhi Diva here. And we just have a little bit of randomization here going on, some compression, and that is basically already it. Of course, very drastic EQing here again, because as I said, we want to have this empty space in the track and we are not creating this if we are leaving all the sounds without equalization. So basically what we are doing again is that we are leaving every single sound in his own space. For example, this diva patch here is really playing in those frequency range. Those very nice hi-hat sounds here are playing in the very high frequency range, and they are not really clashing into each other too much. And yeah, after that we actually have the main plug of the track, which sounds like this. And we also have some crazy automations here on the cutoff with some LFOs. And yeah, actually I didn't really go in here and tweak it much. Just took this preset, and sometimes it's just way easier to just cut the frequencies away because this LFO movement here was a little bit too crazy for me. So then I wanted to get rid of a little bit of the stereo width. Very slightly compressing the sound here. Again, some crazy equalizing. But this is actually very important for those tracks to also have some monophonic sounds which don't have any arpeggiator melodies in here, because this is just way easier to build up the track. They are keeping us in this very nice and dark atmosphere, and then in the break here especially we want to introduce all the melodic elements like the piano and the pad sounds here, and also the arpeggiators can go crazy here. And that's exactly what we did here. We actually added another arpeggiator sound. And that one I found sounded really a lot like Marino Canal, because I think he might be also using the Prophet 5 here or something like this. This time, of course, I used the plugin from Arturia here, but we have this very, very nice and super high frequency arpeggiator sound. And of course also doing a lot of automations here, some nice auto panning going on, and that is basically already it. Again, way too many low frequencies here in the track. But together with those other plug sounds, all those layers are really making our track way more interesting than just adding one, for example. And we can really decide when we want to introduce more of those monophonic elements, and then we can also bring in those melodic elements like those two in the parts where we actually want to open up the track here. And then, for example, as you can see here, we're cutting away all of those melodic elements because we're going into the drop here and we want to get back to this dark and monophonic atmosphere. Then I actually took a vocal sample here and just chopped it up a little bit, and I found this part here which I actually consolidated now, and yeah, just played around with the envelopes. You can see we have some crazy automations on the sustain here, and this was quite important for that sound because otherwise we're just playing the same sample here over and over again. So I just did this funny curves here, and I would just want to show you how it sounds without it. And now we're gonna turn it on. So it's creating some way more interesting movement here. Also, of course, we added quite some randomization on the velocity here, but still this vocal sound was sounding, a little bit too uninteresting for me and not moving enough. So I did quite a lot of processing here. Let's go through it one by one. So very important, we want to have this nice and airy vibe in these vocals. Then we just have this volume automation from the utility here. Some very minor compression going on. And this one is already doing a lot for us. Some nice auto pan is giving some nice movement here. And this one is just really taking it completely to the next level. Also the distortion works great. This one is just really helping to make it sound a little bit more organic and humanized. This distortion effect is usually adding some lower frequencies, so I just want to cut them away. Then we have some side chaining and even some more delay. And you can really see this one is adding some very nice high frequencies, and it worked great on this vocal sound, really pushing this resonance. And maybe you could also already hear in the track that we have quite a lot of automation going on. And we're doing this again with the scent effects over here, which adds some really nice movement. And let's just see how this sounds in our track together. Going into the Valhalla shimmer here. Now it's getting dry again, so here it's getting very spacey with those reverb sounds here. And then when we introduce this low end here again, it's very nice to cut away all those reverb sounds and make it very dry and punchy again. And vocals in general are just a very good way to creating additional emotional content in your track. And we definitely see it in more and modern melodic techno productions, so I also decided to use it here in this track. But let's jump straight into our main lead sound here. So we created really a very interesting sound here, and as you can see we are creating this with a lot of automations here. So let's turn off the effects first and jump into the Diva patch. The patch is actually not that complex as it sounds. The main movement here is coming from this LFO2, where we have a saw up as the waveform, and the rate of the LFO is actually getting modulated by the LFO number 1. And the rate here is very slow, so this is usually a very interesting way of taking your LFO automations here to the next level, and we are applying it on the filter here. This time we're actually turning it down, so we're actually creating a saw down wave here. So you can see this one is already creating most of the sound, and then we are also applying this LFO on the shape modulation here. But it's not having too much of an effect. And other than that, it's not a super complex sound, but as I said, you can already see we are modulating the detune here, not in the Diva, but with our custom curves that I want to show you now here. And let's actually turn this off one more time and see how it sounds without that. Sounds also cool, but I think this tune modulation, which is actually just happening on the second oscillator, so the other two oscillators are actually staying in tune here, but because we're just moving this one, it's really creating this nice detune effect. So you can see now it gets a little bit more obvious. And then we just have a very basic cutoff automation, but of course we applied some important processing again. First we want to compress the sound a little bit. Then we actually apply this very nice crystallizer effect, which is a granular delay. Just very subtly, as you can see, I mixed it in super low here, but sometimes this crystallizer effects just get a little bit too obvious and also taking over the sound a little bit, and just adding this very small granular delays here in the background is already taking our sound to the next level. And what is also really helping to introduce our sound here is that we recorded this lead sound with a bunch of reverb on top, and then we just took this audio and reversed it. You probably already know this trick, but it's really helping to introduce our lead sound here because it's coming in kind of out of nowhere. And yeah, let's just see how this sounds in our track here. And yeah, this is just still a technique that I use pretty much every time when I want to introduce a lead sound that is coming in at a high volume and we're not fading in this lead sound gradually. So this is just a very nice technique. Then we just have this huge lead sound where you can see it's actually just coming in towards the end here, and this one is created in the Yuhi Repro 5 and it has a lot of reverb applied and it's just very nice spaced out sound here. And especially the Valhalla Shimmer here is creating this nice and huge reverb sound. And of course we could have used this more in the track, but sometimes it's just really nice to keep your ear candies for some certain parts and then just don't use it again one more time in the track. For example, here it's harmonizing perfectly with our lead sound, because usually this LFO lead sound, of course, is just having the same note again and again, just one octave up here. But then we are melting this together with this big lead sound and it's creating a nice melodic atmosphere towards the end. And then we have this super low note here. Let's jump more into this nice and big melodic opening here, which we are creating with the piano sound. The piano is just one of my favorite presets here in the Analog Lab 4. It's actually layering two different sounds here, but usually I cut away the pigment sounds, which is also sounding nice, but usually I just want to have this piano here, and you have some nice controls over the piano softness and also the reverb settings, and it's just such a beautiful sound here. As you can see, I played around a lot with the melody here. It's not too complex, we're not having too many notes. But also there's very small notes here in between. And this is already sounding very great on its own, but of course we can't really automate this piano, so I also came up with this pad sound, which also sounds really like Marino Canal in my opinion, because we're using the Repro 5 here again, and has again this very nice high frequency vibe. So the same chords here. And then we have this auto pan, which is making it really interesting. So this time we're actually using this auto pan not as a panning tool, we are more using it as the LFO on the volume. And the way you can do this is just turn up this phase to 360 degrees. And so this one is just automating the volume here, and it works really nice here on this nice and high frequency pad sounds. And on top of that we have some basic EQing and some very basic volume automation, and of course we have the cutoff over here. And then we have this very nice extended chord sound here, which is just basically the first chord but just extended. And as you can see, we're taking the rate up and we're doing this right on the drop here. So first I wanna play this here without this pad sound, which most people would actually do, cut away the chords here after the break is done. But without it, the track just sounds quite empty. But let's add this chords here, and especially with the auto pan, we're starting at a very high speed and then just really nicely slowing it down here. This one is going on until we are introducing these new elements here, the plug sounds. with that being said, I wanna go into the arrangement here a little bit more detailed, but let's first have a look at our last element, which is the FX sounds, and they are actually quite important. It's just a very basic white noise that we created here, and we don't even have any automations in here, but I heard this one in also one of Marino Canal's tracks, so I tried to recreate something similar. The only thing that is going on here is that we have a very long attack sound and also decay, of course. We don't really have any automation on the cutoff here, and yeah, this is basically already it. The only thing that we are doing is that we are stacking the sound up by 2. I really like to do this with my white noise effects here, and then we are using the pan mod, and you can see we map the voice map over here, and then you can see we just pan them all the way to the left and to the right, and this is creating this very nice and big stereo white noise sound. Of course, we don't need all of the low frequency, we add some very strong side chaining, and then we are doing the same that we are doing with the pad sound over here, but actually just in the drop, as you can see, where the pad sound is doing the same. But let's see how we are using this in the track. So it's just very slowly coming in, and the sidechain is very important here. And then we have a very long release time. And the important thing here with this white noise, we are not just casually porting it at the end or towards the start of our new bar. I literally just played the track, and at the point where it felt right for me, I just pressed this note and introduced this white noise, and it works great in our track here. And then I felt I could cut it away, for example, here a little bit earlier, not right in front of the drop. What I already tried to explain you during the process here is the very basic arrangement of such tracks. It's pretty similar like in my dark melodic techno tutorial, where we are starting out with some very basic drum sounds and we are introducing the main drums here later, and we are also doing this with those arp and plug sounds. Here first we want to have those monophone sounds, like for example the atmosphere sound is also just a root note, and then later, for example, here we're starting to introduce more melodic content by adding more of those arpeggiator sounds, and we are also adding this nice and interesting lead sound here right before we go actually into the first small drop here. And I really like to do this, build up all the drums here first in the intro, then cut away the kick or sometimes even also the bass, and then we go back into the first small drop here. And yeah, this is the first time where this lead sound is really strongly hitting, because we're doing some very interesting arrangement here on the first hit of the lead sound. And we're actually doing this on the master channel. As you can see, we have this auto filter applied, and the usual thing to do would be, of course, to apply this auto filter right before the next bar is starting. So maybe you would even cut away here the kick, and then you also cut away all the low frequencies before we go into the drop. But if you listen closely to some of Marino Canal's, we have a little bit more of unique arrangements going on, and he's placing this a little bit more organically throughout the track, and this is just really having a very nice and unique effect on the dance floor. So let's hear what is going on here. So this is just a very surprising and nice technique here to add some further interest. All the people on the dance floor would expect the bass to kick in over here, but then we're introducing this lead sound and you would think maybe the bass is gone for some time, but then it's just kicking like pretty much out of nowhere, and that's just a very nice and unique arrangement technique. And we are also playing around sometimes with the kick, for example. We're putting it a little bit offbeat, as you can see. And this time we're actually using it before we are cutting away. Also a little bit more of an uncommon technique, but it works great in my opinion here. So this one is again used to surprise the listener a little bit again, and so they don't know exactly what is going on. Those are just really those micro arrangement which can take your track really to the next level. But yeah, after this first drop here, we're starting to build up the melodic elements again. For example, the plugs are coming in here slowly again, and then we are introducing all the drums here quite abruptly, and we're using this big change here also to introduce the new elements. For example, the piano's coming in here, and also the pad starts to slightly fade in. And you can really hear it in the track that here is kind of a breaking point where we before had this kind of tensionful and very dark atmosphere. And I really like this technique after the first drop to introduce your melodic elements here. And then of course those elements are guiding us into the big break here, which afterwards we are cutting away all the melodic elements again. And yeah, after that actually a similar thing is happening again. We went back completely into this dark atmosphere. We don't have too many elements. And then we can bring in all the elements here much faster than the first time, because the listener is already used to all of those sounds. So we can build up the track here very fast and also introduce some more melodic content, like for example with this lead sound here, before we are starting to go into the outro and cutting away all of this stuff again. So guys, with those simple steps you can already create this nice dark atmospheric tracks with a very nice emotional touch here to it, like Marino Canal is doing it. And I hope you could take something away from this video. If you enjoyed watching this, please let me know in the comments and by smashing the like, of course. Thanks for watching guys, I see you in the next one.